Welcome to the Jade user group, the first user group for 2021. I'm John Ascroft and I'm CIO here at Jade Software and look after the Jade product amongst other things, and have been, I think, all of the Jade user groups since we started the rebirth of the Jade user groups, gosh, probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And obviously things are a bit different in these times, and there are some pluses and minuses to that, of course. So we were, it was wonderful back in the day when we used to all get together, usually in Auckland, and we could actually socialise and meet face to face. But of course, the advantage of doing it this way is that we can go global. And I'm delighted to say that we've got attendees here from all around the world, and notably from the UK and Australia, as well as New Zealand. So we made the decision about 6 or 8 weeks ago when we were talking about JUG to run it as a remote-only event, mainly so that we could get the global family together rather than just the Australasian one. And gosh, that turned out to be a good decision in the light of the way things turned out. And we didn't have to scramble to move to online. We were already online. We've got a great agenda and setup planned for tonight. This morning, depending on where you're sitting, including a really exciting couple of things from users of the software, as well as just the Jade people. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of those. I know some of them are jolly interesting. So I'm not going to talk for too long. There's a couple of things we want to do though. One is run a poll. So throughout the JUG, you'll have the option to select an answer for this poll, and this is really about releasing service packs or updated versions of the software, new feature content. And currently we're doing a release like Jade 2020, and then we'll do a service pack when there's a major fixes or some content for it. And one of the questions that we've been sort of kicking around is how often should we do those? And so there's some choices there, and I'd like you to think about that. And there's obviously upsides and downsides to this. I know a lot of you have big testing requirements to put in new software, but on the other hand, everybody wants new feature content. So if we can deliver new feature content more frequently, that's probably a good thing. So we'd be very keen to see your view of that. The other thing is that we're running a competition for the second half of the JUG, which will be in October, JUG P2. And for this, we're keen to see any little thing that you've done using Jade or related to Jade. Just do a screen recording, do a wee video, pop it into us. It doesn't have to be professionally edited or anything. And we'd love to showcase some of the great stuff our users are doing with the product. And for that, I'd like to introduce our CEO, Charlotte Walsh. Charlotte's again been to a lot of our JUGs recently, and Charlotte's going to tell us a little bit of what's going on at Jade itself. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks very much, John, and welcome everyone. It's really great to be with you all, and I love the fact that it's a global session, and as John said, you know, good morning and good evening the whole way around. So look, what I wanted to really catch up on today is just giving you, as usual, a bit of a rundown on how the business is going, so you can sort of understand the foundations that we're doing all this from, and then where we're going to next. And so we'll just take 5 minutes or so to run through this. So probably one of the key things is obviously it's been a pretty weird year for everyone, one way or another, or 18 months. But as I think I mentioned at the JUG last year, our recurring revenue base that comes from our Jade customers, and thank you all very much, is part of what has made us strong through the last 18 months with COVID and so forth. In fact, when we look at where we're at financially, we're in a very strong position with our underlying profitability growing by around about 20% in this last year. One of the things that's maybe hard to see when you look at our annual report and results is you might see that we had a break even in the year of 2020, and we're looking at coming in a similar sort of space for 2021. So that really masks how much is being reinvested from the profit that we make. So in this year, in 2021, you might be interested to know that we're actually reinvesting $7 million worth of profit into growth. Now, 5 million of that is in R&D. So that's 12% of our revenue, 12% of revenue is reinvested into R&D. And that R&D is particularly around the development of the Jade platform and also the Jade Third Eye anti-money laundering platform. So around about 50% each there. And then the rest of the remaining 2 million of the 7 million investment for growth is around market presence. So, growing our presence in market, both in terms of our capital Jade customers as well as other parts of the business. And interestingly, our key revenue growth right at the moment is actually coming from the work we're doing with our capital Jade customers. And the work we're doing there is helping people modernize. And, I think it's probably just the right point in time where people have really got to a point with their businesses where they can see that they need to take that next sort of big leap digitally and in terms of how they interact with their customers and how they make the systems more secure, but mostly how they get the most out of their systems. And, maybe where they've created a best of breed kind of an architecture with Jade at the core of that. So we're helping our customers to modernize in those environments, and possibly even the COVID situation has also maybe accelerated, certainly for some of our customers, it has accelerated that program for them as a strategic sort of a must do. So with the growth that we're seeing, we're finding right at the moment, to give you an example, is that we're currently recruiting for 30 new development roles to meet demand, which is a pretty exciting place to be right at the moment. And included in that is 2 new grads for the Jade plant. So we're continuing to build out that our Jade development team, both in terms of size, but also in terms of new skills and getting a good cross-section of people across different generations in the team. So continual refresh and renew there. And in fact, because of the growth that we're getting at the moment with our Jade customers, we're actually running our internal Jade development course to help some of our people upskill. So it's a really great time to be a Jade developer at the moment, and certainly our people and new people coming on board are enjoying the diversity of the work and the different skills, development skills that they're using. So then looking to the future, I think one of the things that you've already seen with Jade 2020, and certainly the themes that are coming through in this Jade user group today, and what you'll see coming out is in the roadmap through to Jade 2022 and beyond, is more and more of Jade becoming a really mature player in a cloud environment. So our future, when we think of Jade, is as creating a seamless cloud experience. And that means both in terms of that development environment and management environment, but also in terms of the tools you might use and the choices that you have, and also security and robustness. So when we think of, say, 2023, we want to be evangelizing between now and then with our customers to move to Jade 2020 or Jade 2022, so you're really able to make the most of Jade as a tool to help grow your business. We know right now when we're helping customers modernize that if they're still on an older version of Jade, like 2016, it's that much harder. We can work with our customers to do a really good job using older versions of Jade. But we know that when we help our customers understand what new versions of Jade has on board and what it can do for them, when we evangelize that with them, that we can do a really great job together and make a real difference in your business. So that's the exciting future that we're working towards, and we're really looking forward to sharing some of our thoughts about that with you today and in the coming weeks as well. And other than that, the other thing I'm really excited about is, as John mentioned before, the idea of some of you being brave and doing little video clips of how you're using Jade and the difference it's making. It's those wee stories that just make such a difference to share with each other, so we can actually see what everyone's doing and the innovation and creativity that's going on. And some of those ideas might spur someone else in this group to think about how to solve a problem. And certainly it's really inspiring for us as the Jade team to think about how we can make an even better tool for our customers to use. So with that in mind, I'm going to happy to take questions as the evening goes along. But right now, I'm going to hand you across to Henry Varney to talk about Skipton and where the business is at and some insights there. So Henry, over to you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Good morning to those in the UK and good evening to those on the other side of the world. I'm in the UK at the moment and probably not really allowed out. So yeah, I was just going to give a quick brief overview of just kind of Skipton Group, how we're doing, how we're from our profit and growth point of view, and then just talk a little about some of the work we're doing with Jade at the moment, bringing out some of the things actually Charlotte's just talked about. So if you just flip to the next slide. So if we look at kind of how the society and group is doing, on the left-hand side, you've got a graph which just looks at kind of our overall kind of group profitability. It's fairly safe to say we had a at the start of COVID, we own a large estate agency or a realtor in the UK, so we didn't sell many houses, and we took quite a lot of what's called provisions or some reserves against some of our mortgage business. But it's fair to say that the first half year of 2021 has been a stellar performance by the group. So we've made pretty much 159 million PBT at the half year for the group and the society. We carried out a major transaction where we bought the other major estate agency or realtor business in the UK, so we've doubled the size of that. And the core business, which is the mortgage side of our business, you can see in the middle is growing significantly. So the group is probably growing by about 10% per year. We're well over 1 million customers now in the society, all of that running on our Jade platforms and our diversified portfolio. So the different businesses we have around the group, including Jade in that matter, contribute to those overall results. And it's probably fair to say, without predicting quite what the year end will look like, that strong growth is continuing. If you're in the UK and you want to sell a house at the moment, it takes about a millisecond, and we're going to have a very, very strong Q3 where various tax rules in the UK are helping our estate agency business. So really just a summary to say that the Skipton Group remains very profitable and continues its investment both in its core business as well as the subsidiaries that we own. In terms then just of kind of Jade and Skipton, just a few things that we're up to. So we now own actually 100%. So previously when I've done these JUG presentations, we've owned something like 99.92. So we've now owned 100%, and myself and our commercial and strategy director, a gentleman called Ian Cornelius, sit on the Jade board. As you might imagine, we haven't really been able to do many physical Jade board meetings over the last 18 months, but the joys of Zoom and Teams have enabled us to operate effectively. As I say, we in the society are continuing our investment in our core Jade platform. That customer base is growing strongly, and we continue to have pretty record activities that we've carried out in the first half this year. Pretty much every month from March has been a record mortgage month, so all about hitting the Jade database and it performing absolutely brilliantly and very resiliently. And just to add the word security, because Charlotte referenced that as well, overall it's been very secure, so that is great news. As Charlotte kind of said, we are also kind of looking at our architecture and have been looking at our architecture for a while and increasing the interoperability between our Jade core platform and the rest of our IT stack and how we enable that to meet all our customer propositions. Over the last 18 months, we have seen our branch transactions reduce pretty much by about 20–25%. They've gone back up as the UK has reopened up, but they certainly have reduced. And we've seen a massive increase in our digital proposition. For information, nearly all of our mortgages now come in digitally. There's virtually no paper involved at all. Those mortgage systems talk to numerous other UK kind of systems around valuations and around affordability and stuff, all using APIs, etc., etc. So significant digitization of our business over the last 2 or 3 years, and that will only continue. Part of that, I'll go 2 bullet points down, is working with Jade in some of those areas. So we're working with Jade heavily in Azure at the moment, and they're building what we call a document repository. So the place where we store a lot of our mortgage offers, our customer statements on the mortgage and savings side that interact with our portal and our web solutions. So a lot of work with Jade in that space over the last 4 or 5 months and going in for the rest of this year. And then general move to cloud, as most probably on this call are doing. So we're working on this with Jade, trying to explore what are our opportunities, what are our timelines for it. Some of that is dependent on some of our hardware options internally within Skipton and our capital investment plans, but certainly a big desire to move that to the cloud and working with our architects as to the art of the possible and what options we've got within that at the moment. And then the third area we're doing with Jade at the moment, we use the word hub in our business for a collection of kind of developers, testers, users, etc. So kind of agile hub, as we would call it. And we're starting to stand up a hub with Jade to try and take advantage of some of their skills, competencies, and try and learn from their ways of working and their experience of working in an agile way. So that's kind of early doors over the last couple of months, but hopefully subject to us signing off some stuff in the corporate plan for 2022, we see an increasing use of Jade in that space as well. So to summarize, yeah, as I say, a very strong Skipton group. We'll make well north of 200 million profit this year. That enables us to invest both, as I say, in our core business and invest in the IT elements of our core business, which we're definitely doing, as well as continue our investments across the group, enabling, as Charlotte has talked about, her ability to do R&D and investment in the Jade business as a whole. So that was my summary of updates. If not, I think I'm going to hand back to John.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Henry. And it's always nice to hear from the parent. If you've got any questions for Henry, I know Henry's pretty busy, but he might have time to answer any questions. If you'd like to throw those into the Q&A at the bottom, we'll make sure we pass those questions on. And of course, that applies to any time during the webinar or session. You can put questions in Q&A. We are monitoring those and we'll answer them when we get a chance. Now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Stephen Pearson to the group. Some of you will know Stephen, he's been around for a while, and I was going to have a wee chat with him, and then he's going to show us some of the work he's been doing. So welcome, Stephen.
Evening, John, thank you.
I was just going to ask, how long have you been working with Jade? How did you first get started with Jade?
I started back in, 1998. Yep, so I did the Jade Developers course back in 1998. I started working with a company called Technology Design Limited. Worked with Daryl Campbell, who's actually presented at some of these things, so he's quite possibly on this call actually. So Daryl Campbell case, I suppose, it was how I code. So yeah, I've learned under him and been working full time with Jade ever since. So 23 years now I've been full-time Jade developing.
What an awesome story, and shout out to Daryl, because I did see his name earlier in the attendees. So nice to see you both here. And Stephen, when you think about Jade, what do you like most about it? What do you find the best feature or the best sort of thing about Jade? Because you've obviously been around for a while and done a few different things. What do you like about Jade?
Jade is actually all that I've actually ever learned. So yeah, so for me, it's always been about Jade, and I've had no desire to do anything else. It's been able to do sort of everything that I've wanted it to do. So yeah, it's been super easy, and I've just kept on going with Jade the whole time. Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful story, and I know we've certainly had various dealings on and off. You've worked for a number of our customers and partners, and it's been great to touch bases every now and then with you. And I know the stuff you're working on is very exciting. I'm not going to steal your thunder by breaking into your presentation, so I thought we'd ask something completely different. What do you like to do when you're not working on Jade? What do you do in your weekends?
I play a bit of volleyball. So yeah, I do that. You sort of a couple of games a week. You can then go around the South Island, going to volleyball tournaments and stuff. You're probably 5 or 6 years. Sorry, yeah, about 5 or 6 per year. Yeah, so that sort of that keeps me interested. Yeah, and gives me a little bit of physical exercise and gets me out of my desk every week. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. You are a tall bugger, of course, aren't you?
I am. I'm the blocker up the front. Yeah.
I can imagine you're pretty good. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, Steve, well, do you want to take it away and tell us a little bit about StaffSync?
All good. Right, hopefully you can see that okay. Just jump back here. I'll share that screen, we'll try again. Yep, that looks a little bit better. Excellent.
That's
right, yes, so thank you, John. So yeah, so as I mentioned, yeah, I started developing with Jade back in 1998. So I've been coming along to a few of these things, but I more sort of listen in and then sneak out the back. So I've never presented at one. But yeah, to be honest, it was always, I thought it'd be pretty cool to have presented a JUG, to be that smart and to know that much about a topic or have done something pretty cool. So I always thought it'd be pretty neat. So yeah, when John asked me, I said, sure. But what I quickly realized is that it was only a pretty cool thought to have presented at a JUG in the past, and presenting at one in the future is actually a pretty scary monster. So when the JUG marketing came out a few weeks back, my face was up there on the list of speakers. It got a little bit real. So if I sound like my voice is kind of breaking up, it's because my voice is breaking up. And in fact, my whole body feels like it's breaking up, to be honest, but we'll get through this. And hopefully there's some things that I'll be able to show you that will be a little bit interesting, and some different things and some different approaches to how a web front end can be done completely from in Jade. So what I'm actually going to show you is the StaffSync website and a few demos and code examples of what we've done and how we went about it. So I'll start up with a super quick background of StaffSync. So we started up about 6 years ago. So originally the system was designed around finding relievers for schools. So what we did was we developed a way that schools can notify all of their relievers at once, instead of just having to call them all up individually. So they would get a push notification sent out to the phone with all the details of the job, and they could just respond yes or no if they wanted to work that job. So 6 years on, we now have about 14 staff, and the system has been extended to no longer just being about finding temporary staff. It's now a full productivity tool for managing staff. So it automates rosters, so rostering requirements and rules, managing payroll and timesheets, time and attendance, so clocking in and out of jobs, leave requests, and as well, of course, the original finding casual staff. So we now have about 25,000 users in the system and about 1,500 organizations using the system as well. So to give you a basic idea of how we got to where we are today, I'll skim over this pretty quickly, but basically our first upfront requirement was that it needed to be an app. So we had to be able to push out jobs to users on their phones so they could respond yes or no to each job. It also had to have a web front end for organizations and people actually sitting at their desktops and using a computer, publishing jobs, managing staff, and that sort of thing. So as I'm sure most of you know, an app for iOS doesn't run on Android or on a website or vice versa. They're all complete. So apps for iOS are written in Xcode using Swift. Apps for Android are written in Android Studio and can be written in quite a few different languages. And of course, the web is all HTML. So we set off down the track originally developing 3 different front ends, but quickly realized this was going to be a bit of a shambles. So the first big decision we made probably about a month in was to scrap those 3 different front ends, and we had to find just one. So we had to find one code base, which just meant one skill set to be able to develop everything. It was just too difficult trying to have different programming languages for each front end. It would also mean we had one consistent look and feel rather than each of the different devices and platforms all looking a little bit different. And they had to work the same. So the same functionality, not one sort of developing faster than the others. They all had to have the same functionality at the same time. So we wouldn't have to be asking people what device you're on or what version you're on or anything like that. And if we had a bug, we could just fix it once, and we would know that straight away every user on every device had the same fix immediately as soon as we deployed it. So HTML5 was the one to rule them all for us. We briefly looked at products where you could actually use HTML to create other apps, but in the end we decided if it's just HTML, then we actually didn't need to have another product in the mix, and we could all do it all completely from within Jade. So we decided that all the content would come from out of Jade as HTML, and each device would just show that HTML rather than actually having to develop any native apps. But we still needed the apps though. So how we went about it was we made all the apps essentially just in an embedded web browser. So being an app, we could still access all of the app stuff like camera, Bluetooth, file browsing. And the big one for us was we could still send push notifications to the device. But the in-app browsers actually have the benefit that you can also use JavaScript code to access native code and vice versa. So for example, we can make the phone vibrate. So obviously like your normal browser, if you're browsing something, it won't vibrate. But using JavaScript, we can actually call the native function on the app to actually make the device vibrate. But we still wanted it to actually look appy. We wanted it to look and feel like an app, not just a website. So there are three main things that we did to actually achieve that. Right, so at this stage, right, I'll do a bit of a live demo. I know what you're thinking, right? First time presenter, a live demo. This guy must love life, eh? Wish me luck. Here we go. Okay, so this is the StaffSync website, and this is what I'll walk you through and show different parts of it. So the first thing that we did to make it look more appy is we've made the whole site within frames. So as much as some people hate frames, they're actually still in. So for us, we have the top menu bar, and we have all the menus, and we have the background image that are all part of the main frame. So as we load up and load up different pages, then you'll notice all the content, the background picture, all the menus actually stay the same. Nothing actually changes. And just as we move around, yep, so all that stuff stays there the whole time. It doesn't change. So it hasn't got that like white flicker to go to like a website while the next page loads up. Everything just looks to load over top, and it's nice and easy. The second big thing that we've implemented is responsive HTML. So for those of you that don't know what responsive HTML is, it basically just means that your site responds to the size of the screen. So in this case, we're on a big full-size screen here. If I minimize the page down and say go to that size, then that is quite literally exactly how our phone app looks. So there's not different code for the different size screens. The same content literally just resizes. If it's got space, it goes left, right. When it goes small, that same content drops down to the bottom. So as I click on something up here, if it doesn't show to the right, it'll let you scroll down so you can see it down the bottom. So the same HTML, we're not writing different code for different size screens or anything like that. So that's responsive HTML, which we use throughout. So there are a few different ways you can go about that. We've used a product called Bootstrap. So those of you that know Bootstrap will recognize this sort of look. So basically it's a library that does all that for us. So we don't have to write any code to actually handle it. We just make sure that if we write Bootstrap code with the right classes and everything, then it's going to do all that for us. It's going to look the same across all devices. So we don't have to do anything special. And the third big one to make it sort of look more appy, which we use extensively, is something called Ajax. So for those of you that are unaware of what Ajax is, Ajax basically lets you load up content on the page without having to reload the whole page the whole time. So for example, as I click down these options down the side, that just loads up a little bit of content to the side. It doesn't reload the whole page. So that's Ajax. It just pulls back a little bit of HTML and slots it into the page at the right spot. So that's enough of a background. So the rest of my presentation now will be about how we've done all this within Jade. So as I alluded to earlier, we just use Jade for this entire website. So there's no other third-party development tools or languages used. There's no .NET front end, there's no web services, no Azure authentication or anything like that. It's all 100% Jade. So all of the security, all the authentication, and all the content comes from out of Jade. So those of you that have developed websites and web front ends from within Jade will recognize that that's not a sort of normal look. It looks a little bit different from the standard Jade methods, which are your form generation and importing HTML documents. So what we've done is we still use the Jade HTTP DIL, but we just use it in a slightly different way. So those of you that don't kind of know how this all works, I'll just give a really quick introduction to the Jade HTTP DIL and the web session class, which is what we use, and explain how they work. So at this point, I couldn't really Google any fancy images. They're all Jade specific. So you get to experience some of my creative genius using my graphics package of choice, which is Magnadoodle. So here we go. So this is Cindy. So Cindy is sitting at her desktop and she's browsing the StaffSync website. So any request that comes through to Jade has this Jade HTTP DIL at the end of it. So all the Ajax requests, all the full page HTML, whatever they are, they all have that at the end of the URL. So that comes in through that DIL, and then that DIL makes the connection to the Jade database. So when it makes that connection to the database, it creates an instance of a class, which is the web session class. So that web session has all the details to do with that browsing request. It's got all the parameters, all the session IDs and tokens, uploaded files, cookies. Basically anything you need to know about that session is wrapped up in that instance of the web session class. So then we generate the response with the HTML, we send it back to the client and all's good. And then we delete the web session afterwards and it's all tidied up. So if we had 12 people or 3 people here all browsing at exactly the same time, they would all come through the DIL. It would make 3 different connections to the Jade database, and we would have 3 instances of that web session class. And again, each of those sessions contains all the information about what that particular person is wanting or submitting and passing back forward to us. So the web session class has a method on it called process request, and that handles all the requests coming from the browser. So usually you wouldn't play around with this method as all the standard Jade web functions would sort of kick in from there. But what we've done is we've re-implemented that process request method and we don't call inherit method. So we handle it completely ourselves and we build out all of our own content before we call the reply method and then send that content back to the browser. So doing it that way means that we have full control over all the HTML. So we could send back HTML, we could send back JSON, or we could even send back JavaScript or whatever is needed for that particular request. We've got complete control over what we send back. So if we look super quickly at the process request method, it's got a couple of parameters there. The query string basically tells us what the person is asking. It's the part after the question mark in the URL. So in this example, for us, it would be an organization that's after something and they're just asking for their profile. The HTTP string, that gives us back all the post data that comes in. So that's if you're filling in a form or something like that. In this case, they've filled in a form to save their organization details. We've got the details of which organization it is, the name. We use Google addressing, so there's a whole lot of Google address stuff, and the phone number that they've changed it to. So if we jump in now and start to have a little bit of a look at some code. So if we look at the process request method, so on the web session class, we have the process request, and you can see we have re-implemented it. So the first thing we do is we basically sort of unpack it all. We get all the details from the query string and the HTTP string. And then first up, the first thing we do is we look for a valid web session. So aside from the log on screen, every request that comes in has to have a session token or a session ID, whatever you want to call it. If it doesn't have one of those, then straight away we kick them back out, and we return out. That tells us who the person is, what organization they're from, all of that sort of information. And then essentially the process request method, it would get huge if we tried to handle everything. So we basically break it down into 3 parts. If it's staff that are using it, if it's an agency coming through us, or if it's an organization. So that example that I gave had organization up in the query string. So that would come into this method and would then jump into all the methods, all the queries that an organization can make. So again, just to make it manageable, we break it down into a whole lot of different sort of functions. If it's for payroll, if it's for rostering, if it's for leave, just to make it all manageable. So if I do a quick search, that example had profile. So we were just looking for the profile. So here we come down now. So if the parameter exists just with the word profile, then we're looking at the profile page for an organization. So whichever organization we're on, we just show the HTML for the profile, and then we're out of there. Here we return out. And if we look at the profile HTML, then you'll start to see how we're doing all this here now. So you'll see here that we're just writing all the HTML essentially just straight into Jade here, and then we just slot in all the, say, profile pictures, the name of the organization, the address, whatever fields we need to, we just drop it all into the right spot here within the HTML. When we get down to the bottom, to send it back to the browser, there is a method on that web session class, which is just reply, and you send it a string. So in this case, we're sending back a full HTML page, and we send it back the title, which is our profile. We have a left-right layout, so we've just sent back the left HTML, and there is no right HTML. And once we have replied to that session gets deleted and tidied up, and that's essentially the process. So if we have a look at that page now, if we jump into here, we have a profile button down the side. So that just sends through the query string with organization and profile, and that loads up the profile page. It's got profile title at the top. We have some left HTML down the side and nothing off to the right. So just, yep, simple as that. If we update details, so I wanted to change the person's phone number here, say for example, I can just get rid of that and update the store details. I get a little pop-up at the top, your store details have been successfully updated. So nothing actually changed there on the page. It didn't have to reload any content. All it did is sent back a little AJAX reply saying actually that we've updated the store details. So if I jump back into the code again, and we see where we do that. So on our organization class, we have a method that saves the web details. So as they come back in, we basically pull out all those parameters from all the form fields that were on that. We get it from the HTTP string. That's where all the post data comes in. So we pull out all that information. We do a whole lot of validation instead of updating, but basically down when we get to the end, the reply that we're sending back this time, instead of being HTML, it's a JSON structure that just gives a little success info, and there's scripts that handle that and pop up the little green thing at the top saying your store details have been successfully updated. So in this case, we send back a JSON structure, and then the JavaScripts know how to handle that one. So we can mix it all up. We can have the different responses coming back the whole time. If we jump at something, say like a calendar. So this sort of page shows all the details that are at this particular store. In this case, I'm using a supermarket as a demo. As I jump back through the months, that will race off, that will do an AJAX request, and that will pull back a JSON structure with all the details of those numbers for each day. As I click on that day, 23, that will load up the 23 jobs that are there. So that content wasn't preloaded or anything like that. Literally, as soon as I click that, it races off to the server, generates the HTML and comes back. So our first AJAX response was JSON, and then we drill down into HTML. If I click on one of those HTML tile details there, that will load up more details off to the side. And again, that's AJAX. Each of those things just pulls down more information as we need it. So there's no limit to how much we can sort of drill down with that AJAX. AJAX can actually be used to build up quite a substantial page. So like, for example, if we look at a staff screen here, it's an extremely basic HTML page that just shows some numbers across the top for how many staff we have, and that's essentially it. But as soon as I do a search, say if I do AR and go enter, so you'll notice that popped up pretty much instantly because we're just pulling back little bits of data that are actually super quick rather than loading up a whole page. So we've got an AJAX response here that shows all of our staff that have AR in their name. If I click on one of those details, AJAX will then load up that content off to the side. And as I jump between each of these tabs, it will pull down more details again via AJAX and just populate that little area on the screen that I'm wanting that data. So what started off as a pretty simple page with just some bullets at the top and a search screen, AJAX can just keep filling that in more and more and more, and you can end up with quite a complex page and more information, but you're only showing it as the user wants it. It's not loading it all up at once. It's only as they're actually clicking and navigating around that you're loading up that content. So it can also populate that content in modal screens. So like, for example, here, we're on a rostering screen where we can set up the hours someone works. We can add new hours in. Get back on the screen and click, there we go. So that will actually pop up a modal form, and AJAX can fill in that and all the form details, validation on that form and everything. So we can do all of that via that AJAX that comes back. So if I want to add some new hours for this person in, and they start at say 10 AM starting on the 20th, save that details. So the response that came back returned that little bit of AJAX HTML, and it updated just a little page. So again, the whole page didn't reload, it's just that little bit of snippet comes back. So you can do quite a lot with AJAX. It's actually an extremely powerful tool. Most of our content is all AJAX. Down the left-hand side are like the sort of key functionality areas, and they are the only full HTML pages that we have. So there's probably only 10 web pages in the entire site. And then everything after that is just built up by AJAX, just filling in more and more information as you actually get to it. So we'll look through one more complicated example, and then we'll jump back into Jade and follow how it goes through it. One of the rosters, one of the modules that we have in StaffSync is a rostering module. I'm pushing my time a little bit, so I'll skip over some of the screens that I was going to show you. I must be waffling a bit, sorry. But basically, with the rostering, with this say test store here, I've got it's a supermarket. We can work out all the rostering requirements for each department based on the target sales hours. sorry, on the target sales dollars that they will put into the store. So they may put in, say, a budgeted turnover of, say, $1 million, for example, and then that will trickle down through each department. So each department will know if the store is going to do $1 million, say the bakery may do 100,000. And then the bakery knows to do 100,000, I'm going to do 15 on a Monday, 20 on a Saturday, and then it knows to do 20 on a Saturday. I'm going to need 3 bakers starting at 4 a.m. I'm going to need 5 bakers assistants coming in at 9 a.m. So by entering one figure for the store, the entire roster and requirements can be built up across all the departments and all the roles and all the users. So if I click on, say, bakery, Ajax will just again pop down the little side here, so I can see the budget for the bakery department for the week and how many hours that works out that it's going to be. I can tweak that a little bit. So if it's Easter and there's going to be some more hot cross buns, or it's meat week and the butchery gets busy, I can tweak that sales figure and save it. And then that will trickle through to, say, checkouts. If it's going to be busier, then they're going to need more checkout staff. So saving that will change all the requirements for all the checkouts as well. But so this page here, say, for example, on Wednesday, I can see I've got 3 staff there. In my baker's role, I've only got 1 staff here, and 26 more hours are required. So if I click on that one there, Ajax will race off, it'll pull back and it'll show me all my bakers down the right-hand side here. So these are all the people that could fill in those extra hours for me here. I can see Natasha's available with the green plus. So you'll notice as soon as I click on Natasha, this cell will change and it'll update the details. So if I add Natasha to the job, I now have 2 people working and I'm only 20 hours short. So if I click on that day, I can drill down into a bit more detail. That's a pretty high level top sort of look. I can jump down into the daily view. If I click to go into daily, just give myself a bit more space, then I can see across the entire day in quarter-of-an-hour increments who I've got working under each of these particular roles here. So you'll see, so if I get down near here towards the end of the day, I've got 0.25, so I've got an extra quarter of an hour. I've got too many people working there. So I could literally just grab that end bar and I could drag that back and I could shorten that person's hours. I could click on here, that will load me up the details of that particular person that's working. I can see they're working 57 hours already this week. So it's quite easy to just cut back their hours and drop them back to there. So for instance, if I come a little bit earlier in the day, I can see I'm short down here. So starting here, I can click at 8 o'clock in the morning. That will take me across. I was looking at a bakery assistant role. So this will show me down the side all the people that are available for the bakery assistant role. So I could add in Waleed, click that one, and the bar for Waleed is dropped underneath there, and I now have him working in there as well. Another quite cool feature is we can do one-click meal breaks with them here. So if I want to say stagger when people are taking the meal breaks, I can just click around and move the different times that they're taking lunch breaks so they're not all working at the same time. So all of this isn't just painting it on the screen. As I click, it's not just drawing a fancy bar and then I click save somewhere else. Every time I click save, it races off with an Ajax request. It comes back, it redraws the bar and it fills in all the details and updates all the numbers at the top. So if we jump into Jade and have a look at one. So what we're going to look at is this dragging bar thing. So if I drag the bar, it actually updates about 4 different areas on the screen. It redraws the bar, it updates all the numbers at the top, and we also have like productivity numbers up on the top here, which they're aiming to meet as well. So if we jump into code and we have a quick look at that one there. So it's a timesheet detail and we're resizing the activity. If we have a quick look how we got there, just again to show the whole path as we come down. Oh, what am I doing? Method, references, method, references. So everything comes in through the process request. So this is an organization request that goes into the organization queries. It then would have had 4 rostering up in the query string, which will take us to the rostering functions. And then we would have had resize activity up in the query string. So that then calls us into this method here where we are resizing one of those bars. We won't look too much in this, it's a whole lot of code, but essentially we pull out the size of the bar that they're dragging to work out a start time and an end time. Once we've got a start time and an end time that we're going to check, we check if that person can work within those role requirements. So if they're not going over, say, 40 hours a week, if it's a butcher and we don't like them playing with knives for too long, if they've worked for too long, then it may say no, yeah, they can't work that long or whatever. So it checks that they can work within those requirements. If they can, if they can't, it'll give us an error string. So if we have no error, we update all the details, and then we will send back the JSON details here for that rostering row. So if we jump into this one, we build up a bit of HTML for the 4 different options, but this is really the part that I wanted to show you down the bottom here. So if we had an error message, we'll return the error message, and that will pop up a little error as to why it couldn't be done. But we can return like 4 different parts of HTML that get updated all across the page in different places by returning it all within a JSON structure. So we have a JSON structure that has, say, the header row, header HTML, a blocks row, and the blocks HTML. So we can send back the HTML for all those 4 different things, and then the JavaScript that gets that reply will pull that apart, and then it knows where to draw all those 4 different things across the 4 different parts of the screen. So just one last quick little demo, which I'll just show, is just how easy it is to update all this stuff. Jump into there. So another of the modules that we have is a leave module. If I jump back into dev though, we won't do that live. So we have a leave module. So the leave module here, there we go. So it shows if it shows all the leave requests from people, and you can accept or you can decline that leave. So we've got 3 different leave applications here. So if we jump into Jade again, if we go to the leave request class, that tile for showing the leave is this method here. So essentially we just build up what colors we're going to use, what icons we're going to use here within Jade. And then the actual part of the HTML that we send back is just that little part there, and that displays that little tile there on the page. We do quick references on that one. So anytime that we're showing leave on the screen, we're just looping through the Jade dictionary of whatever leave request it is. And then we call that to make up one big HTML string, and then we return that back. So if I wanted to tweak this pretty quickly, so we wanted to add a big border, say down the side of that for whatever reason. If you know style sheets code, you'll recognize this code. If not, it's pretty self-explanatory. So I can make a border down the left, say 10 pixels wide, make it solid, and make it black. That look right? Yep. So I can compile that. And then as soon as I jump into the website, if I change the tabs, it'll redraw it. I now have a big black border down the side. If I wanted to make it a little bit smarter, so instead of say being black, I can flick into a bit of Jade code, say if it's approved. If it's approved, I could show it green. Otherwise, make it red. Right, yep. And again, if I just reload that page, yep, so it's now red if it's been declined, and if it's red if it's been approved. So super simple and easy to do. So there's no changes to web services. There's no having to add in new attributes for JSON structures or anything like that. No need to send it off to some other .NET developer out on the front end and coordinate everything, getting it all released. It was quite literally 40 seconds of code and like 40 characters of code. But as soon as I compile it, I can see it out on the website straight away. So I could immediately put that code into test. If it was super urgent, we could push it out to production even, because there are no structural changes, there's no reals or anything like that. Not that, of course, we'd ever push out to production during the day. That's purely hypothetically speaking, of course. Anyway, quickly moving on. So my final slide, just to finish up. I have gone a bit over time, sorry, but if I jump back to my final slide. So just to give you some numbers of what we do through the StarSync system. So these are numbers from the 16th of August, so the day before we went into lockdown. So web requests that actually came through to the Jade database was 241K. Average response time for those was 51 milliseconds. So as you'll see by browsing around on that site, it is quick because it's not pulling down huge amounts of code. It's just little bits of snippets of code the whole time, and it slips it in. So as soon as you click something, it's like virtually instant up there. On that day, we had 4,800 unique visitors. We published 2,800 casual jobs, and we sent out about 38,000 push notifications to phones. And across a typical month, we usually do about 50,000 jobs. The busiest hour that month was 500 jobs in 1 hour. So that's about 100,000 timesheets, and quite a few of those we send off via APIs off to various payroll providers as well. And across a typical month, we probably do about 1.3 million push notifications out. So I realize on some scales, it's not the biggest system, but this system just performs fantastically. Jade just doesn't even blink. So the performance on even the most basic server is fantastic. It's steady and consistent. We just have a virtual server at a data center up in Auckland. It's not a highly spec server, but even when it gets very busy in the morning or at night trying to find relievers, Jade just delivers perfectly for us. It really works great, and we are extremely happy with it and what we've been able to produce with Jade. So yeah, I'd just like to finish up by saying a big thank you to all of the Jade team, the account managers, Jade support, and the plant have all really stepped up and provided extremely good support when we've needed it. So a big thank you very much to everyone. So sorry I've gone a little bit over time, but I'll pass it back to you, John. I might not have much time for questions now, but happy to take any that people might have.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Stephen. That was really inspirational. It's wonderful to see just the performance and the slickness of the whole thing, and to think that you've done it entirely in Jade is just a tribute to you and the product as well, of course. I'm sure there will be some questions, so if people want to raise anything, or perhaps they can get in touch with you later or type them in as we go. I think you're with us for the whole rest of the session, Steve?
Yes, I will be. Yep.
One question that did come in a bit earlier was, I think, related to Charlotte's talk, where the question is, with the new Jade hires, are you looking at hiring offshore? It's all but impossible for New Zealanders who are currently living overseas to actually get back to New Zealand to take up jobs here. Yes, good question. So our roles vary a little bit. It depends. Some of them have a requirement to be in a particular place, relatively few of them actually, but we do have some that we really need you to be in Australia. Some are based in Auckland, some I think are based in Dunedin, and some are flexible. In general, I think we've regarded flexible as being anywhere in New Zealand, probably Australia. Without being the hiring manager, I'm not one to commit anyone. I don't particularly see why we couldn't have someone working remotely, particularly an expat, but we'd take that as we went. We're certainly advertising and all the normal online things that someone would look in to find a job like that. So oh, what's the name of the damn thing? Whatever. Seek, thank you. And on our website, etc. And I see Charlotte's also typing it out. It's probably more cohesive and clear than mine. So thanks again, Stephen, for that presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I haven't actually seen the whole system running before, and it's just, yeah, really amazing. And those stats are quite something as well, the volume of transactions that you're handling. So the schedule now is that we're going to have a 5-minute...
Hang on, John. I've got some questions here.
Oh, you've got some questions. Okay.
Yes, I've got some questions. So first is, thanks for sharing your company's story, Stephen. As a developer, what added knowledge have you found useful in expanding your software for new functionality?
Sorry, what was that question? You watch?
What added knowledge have you found useful in expanding your software for new functionality?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the big thing for us, I suppose, originally it was that whole app path, and just learning how apps even work. And so we just sort of followed that sort of typical path of like starting with the Android, and starting with the iOS. But as I said, that just got like way too messy. So it was probably about a month's worth of work that we had to sort of throw out and like start again. But just sort of learning how all that stuff works, and then learning what is available. So the whole like web control to be able to be embedded within browsers, we didn't even know that one existed. So just once we learned that sort of thing existed, then it just opened up all the possibilities basically. So it's been a big sort of learning journey the whole way, just as you learn more stuff that becomes available, and then trying to work out how you can hook it into your app as well, make it better.
You started off by saying that it was initially a way for companies, I think, to ask temp staff, if they'd be able to fill a role. How long has it taken to? Because that's quite a big change. That's huge there that you got compared to what you were saying before. How long has that taken?
Sorry, how long did that? original
To,
part.
to progress from what
To
it
progress
was,
from
which
that,
was
right.
just
Sorry. Yep. Yeah, so we've always been, I mean, very, like client focused, I suppose, and like what we do. Yep. So before we even started developing the software, we thought it was a good idea, but we spoke to schools and we sort of worked out if it was actually feasible. So we started with that originally. Then once we had schools starting to use it, then it was basically just the clients sort of coming to us and saying, this is really great. Can you now do the next part? Yep. So can we now, instead of just finding casual staff, can you also manage all of our full-time staff and like with the rostering as well? So then we'd start on that path and we'd develop that. Then we'd get asked, say, for example, to build leave requests into it. So we'd start to build all of that into it as well. So it's not, it hasn't just sort of been like bright ideas yet developing. It's more been putting something out there and then getting that embedded and working well, and then actually having the schools, having the clients actually talk back to us and say, this is really good now, and now can you extend it a little bit more? So that's how our development sort of pathway has always been. This has been as the needs there, then we just sort of push out and we develop a little bit more, making sure that it can be used for anyone. So it's not sort of written something just for one particular organization. If we view it as something that could be beneficial for everyone, then we kick in and we develop that to make the whole product better.
Yeah. And also I noticed you had, when building your HTML code there was a lot of string plus some variables plus string, etc. Regex is in Jade now. Do you plan on using that now?
I'm actually not aware on that one, to be honest. Yeah, I'm actually not aware. It could be quite a big rewrite. Who knows? Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, there certainly are, I mean, some more Jade stuff that we're looking at, I'm hooking into. I mean, webhooks is the next big one that we'd like to start playing with, because there are a couple of pages that just poll in the background, like checking for new responses to jobs. So there aren't, there are certainly things on the platform now that we'd certainly like to get hooked in as well as time allows. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much. And if there's any more questions for Stephen or questions generally, feel free to pop them in. We're going to take a 5-minute break now so that everyone has a chance to stretch their legs. And so on my PC, it says 9:01 p.m. So we'll see you back here at 9:06 p.m. On my PC. Right, see you soon. Hello and welcome back. I hope you've had a good stretch and are ready for the second half. I'm still sort of buzzing over that presentation. It was just great to see. Thanks so much again, Stephen. So now moving on, I'd like to introduce John Richardson. Again, most of you will know John, our Jade plant manager, and John's going to talk to us initially about the upcoming service pack for Jade 2020. So over to you, John.
Good evening and good morning. Thanks, John, and thanks, Stephen. That was a great presentation. Really good to see a different view of how to build apps with Jade. But now we're going to take a step back and from the applications and look at and talk about the Jade platform, and in particular, the Jade 2020 service pack. So from 2016 onwards, we changed our naming structure. So each release was based on the year. So you knew after 5 years, it was the end of support. But we also moved away from minor releases. So instead of doing minor releases, we issued service packs. The idea that we'd only release a service pack when there was sufficient need. Now, we produced a service pack for 2016, which was to provide enhancements and maintenance for the RPS module. But we didn't produce one for 2018. But for 2020, we are going to produce a service pack. Now, the other impact around changes at this stage was that we lowered the bar for hot fixes. So because we didn't have a regular delivery of minor releases, we had to get fixes, important fixes to people in a timely manner. So you'll see that we've lowered the bar for hot fixes in that area. Now, we're going to produce a service pack for 2020, and this will be available at the end of this month. So I'm going to talk a little bit, before I go on to the content, I'm going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of a service pack, given that we've only produced one in the past, and we're also going to cover why you should take it and what's in it. So let's look at the characteristics. Service packs contain important bug fixes which don't warrant hotfix and small but significant features. They contain no structural changes that would require a reorg, which is really important. They require no scripts to be run as part of the upgrade. We even avoid new method names that may conflict with your own method names, and in these, if there are any of this methods of this nature, we even provide temporary names until the next major release. So the idea being that going to a service pack is a low risk option, no different really from deploying multiple hot fixes. So many of our customers don't upgrade frequently, and this is understandable for a platform upgrade. So to make the most of the upgrade, if you go to the service pack, you'll get all of the new release plus the latest features. So this is what we're going to recommend to all people going to 2020, is to go straight to the service pack. So the focus of the service pack 1 for 2020, this is around security. This is largely a continuation of what we were doing in the main 2020 release. Interoperability, we're still focusing on REST at this stage. There are a number of things around design and coding flexibilities, and these are directly from JEDI's or from work that we were doing in the 2020 major release. Development productivity, as always, features heavily, and it's an ongoing theme for us, and there's a number of areas we'll talk about that as we go. And lastly, there's a reasonably unusual end user improvement as well. So let's look at security. Following the release of 2018, we embarked on a security review. Now, we put the most urgent changes into 2018 hotfix, and then the next batch in priority order into 2020. We'll continue this process with each release as we go. Here in the 2020 Service Pack 1, we've extended SSL support over a number of Jade to Jade connections. So as you can see from the slide, we're doing the app server to the database server, standard client to the database server, and the .NET client and the ODB standard client. So they're all included in this service pack. So if we take a look at interoperability, we're very much still focused on REST and to provide assistance in the provision of REST services from within Jade. We've provided an automated generation of a REST open API. So this provides a definition which is both human and machine readable. Now, in terms of design flexibility, really, I suppose you'd call this both design and coding flexibility. There are three areas that are involved in the service pack. There is a new class of array, arrays of any, which is an actual extension of the flexibilities that we have around data structures. In terms of collection methods, we've introduced a number of these. That some of these are follow on from work we did in 2020. And also this shows an example of where we have had possible name conflicts. So we've introduced, for example, a method called try copy in this area. And of course, try copy is something that you may well have used yourself. And so for the service pack, we've called it try copy __ so that if you do have any naming conflicts, you won't have to resolve them at this stage. Though we will revert back to try copy when there's a major release when you might expect to deal with naming conflicts. Lastly, we keep working on the language, and in this case, we've extended the create instruction so it can be used in more places, but has the potential to reduce code. We are, of course, here aiming to produce a language that enables you to write succinct and elegant code. Obviously, we can't guarantee that you'll write elegant code. Certainly, if I'm an example, I've never achieved that. So they don't let me code anymore, which is probably a good thing. Now, in terms of development productivity, which has always really been a driving force for Jade, we take the widest view of developer productivity. So we don't just focus on what you might be doing in the IDE in terms of building code, but also diagnostic work, testing, those sorts of areas. So these are the four main areas of enhancement in 2020 Service Pack. First of all, the report writer. Now, the report writer is still a key element of many customer systems, and we are committed to improving it. In the Service Pack, we've increased the ease of use for your developers and, of course, for your customers, who many of whom are involved in writing reports or just modifying the standard reports that you provide. So these changes are designed to speed up the design process, help you find things quicker, and remove some of the uncertainties in places. Now, unit testing is a key part of modern development process, and more of our customers are making use of our unit test facility. So we want to improve their experience with this feature. So in the Service Pack, we've given more options around the unit test runner, so you can select tests more easily. Time is easily wasted on tracking down problems, bug fixes and so forth. So we want to help in this area, and one of the key parts of that is the debugger. So we've included a number of small, but actually probably quite time-saving changes to the debugger. Lastly, as always, we've made continuous improvements to the IDE as we've gone along, and the vast majority of these have come direct from your JEDIs. So things like within the editor and so forth, changes in those areas. Right, the last one that I'll talk about is end user improvements, and this is an unusual one. We've now provided support for the 16-bit Unicode characters at the higher end. Now, I can't remember exactly what the number is here, but the very higher end of the range. This includes things like mathematical symbols and emojis. Not an easy thing for us to do, actually, to include these, because emojis are complex characters to fit into our software, but they're now going to be available in the Service Pack. So, last word of encouragement: if you're planning to upgrade to 2020, please go straight to the Service Pack. It's got more fixes in it than standard 2020, and it's got some very useful features. So, William, do we have any questions?
Someone asks if we have an underscore name, will they have to change their code later, or will Jade take care of that? I believe the answer is you can't actually put an underscore at the start of a name of your method, can you?
No, and we put, in our example, we put in the underscore at the end. So we've picked some pretty unusual names there. We didn't. If, of course, you do have the same name, yes, you would have a conflict, and no, we wouldn't automatically change it. No. No, you can't use emojis as part of your variable method names. No, they're just there. You can have them in your data.
That's all of them.
Okay, thank you very much, William. Okay, so let me introduce our next speaker, which is Tim Aitchison. Tim is one of our system engineers with a special interest in Jade training. Today, he's going to present details of our latest training module. So Tim, over to you.
Thanks for that introduction, John. Let me just share my screen, and there we go. Wonderful. So, hi everyone. As John said, I'm Tim, and today I'm here to tell you about the new addition to our Jade developer course offerings, which is a Jade development security course. Now, I understand that it's a bit of a tradition whenever you're talking about anything to do with security to lead off with some scary statistic about security threats, and I wouldn't want to disappoint you on that one. That said, there is also a bit of room for optimism. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with a bit of a good news, bad news approach. Firstly, the bad news. 64% of companies worldwide have experienced at least one form of a cyber attack. So that's more than half of companies have had a focused cyber attack on them. And so you can't quite take that attitude of, you know what, I understand it happens sometimes, but surely it wouldn't happen to us. It's actually greater than 50-50 chance. But I did promise you some good news. Most of these attacks are actually getting thwarted by good security practices by the companies. So we're now at the point where organizations are now preventing 87% of all cyber attacks. Now, the trick is to make sure you're in that 87%. And that's where the new course comes in. We describe an organization as having a good security posture when there are good security processes embedded all throughout the organization. Now, this course, it's specifically tailored to developers. Now, we are considering adding a course here more tailored towards DevOps and the like in the future, but this is not that course. What it will do is it will provide a general security overview and also provide an overview of Jade specific security. And of course, we're also going to have practical examples in there. Now, in this course, we're going to be covering two security frameworks. First one is Stride, which is used to analyze what security threats that we need to worry about. And then in the course, we also cover AAA, which is all about managing access to a system. Now, we not only cover the frameworks, but we also go the next step and we start applying those to Jade examples. Just to give you kind of an idea of how that might work, let's consider the AAA framework. We can discuss that AAA framework, and then we apply that to, say, the Jade Forms logon procedure for a desktop application. So for that, we'd use the get and validate user and is user valid. Now, as part of that, we've also got kind of like tips and tricks with regard to security incorporated into the course as well. So one other example of something we would cover in that area is we cover how to use Microsoft Active Directory in order to log on to a Jade system using your domain credentials. So that's just kind of a fun little extra in there. Now, what we can also do is we can take that same framework and then we can apply it in a different Jade context. So we can take that AAA framework and then we can also look at how you can apply it when you're looking at how to control access in a web services context. And so in an example, we use the JSON Web Tokens feature of Jade 2020. So students of the course can learn about how to use that new feature and also learn how that ties into security best practices. In this course, there's also a couple of security kind of gotchas that we're also going to cover over. Now, the first one of these is ensuring that a system is secure, not just in your normal code flows when everything's going how you expect, but also what if something goes wrong and you get a bit of an exception? Still want to make sure that we're secure. Which brings us to a bit of audience participation. Because we're talking about a training course, we're going to give you some, the teacher's going to ask some questions to the audience at this point. Here you've got a method. Now it will compile and it will run, but there's something wrong with it with respect to security. I'll give you a bit of a hint. That handle exception method is going to do a resume next. If you think you can identify what the problem is, go ahead and post it in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to have a bit of a look at that. And once someone has been brave and chucked in an answer. Good on you, Kevin. So we've got a exactly correct answer there. If Kevin still says, if an exception occurs during the validate method, then this whole method is going to return true. That is exactly right. So this is kind of a bit of an example of one of the the core concepts of security deny by default. This method breaks the deny by default rule because the default case right down at the bottom is a return true, which means that if you get an exception in your validate method, it's actually going to skip right past that return false after the if not validate, then return false. And it's going to go straight to that return true. And so your validation is going to actually say that the inputs were okay, even though they weren't, because it got an exception. Now, next thing to kind of look at is code injection. I'll give you a few seconds to enjoy my my beautiful XKCD comic that I stole off the internet. Now, this comic is an example of SQL injection, which is a kind of code injection when you've got a SQL database. One of the nice things about Jade is we're not actually vulnerable to SQL injections, or at least we're not nearly as vulnerable to SQL injections. So the sort of injection you see in this comic isn't something we don't have to worry about quite so much, but we do still have to consider code injection in Jade. So one particular situation, to give you a bit of an example, where we have to be just a bit extra careful is when you're using transient methods. So especially if any user input is let anywhere near the method source. To consider a bit of an example, let's look at this. If we consider the inputs on the left going into the transient method source on the right, first up, John Smith, that'll of course be completely fine. That's the sort of input you'd expect. Now, the example from that comic, the good old Bobby Tables, will actually be fine too. There's kind of two reasons for that. First of all, drop table students, while being very dangerous to a SQL database that has a table of students, will do absolutely nothing in Jade because that is not valid Jade code. Also, in this particular method, we're using the double quotes for the right statement in the transient method source, and in their code injection, they've got a single quote. So they're not actually going to be able to escape us properly. That's not going to do anything bad to us. But that third and final one will. That third input, what it's going to do is it's going to escape the quote, and it's going to do a process.debug. That's probably not, you don't want it to happen, but it's not as bad. But that could actually be any arbitrary Jade code that can do anything whatsoever. That could be a complete disaster depending on what a malicious user put in there. So going back to the course, in the course, students learn how to identify these sort of situations, and they also learn what to do about it. So we learn about how to sanitize user input. Now, hopefully I've, made that exciting enough that you're now wondering, oh, awesome, how can I get access to this course? So first up, the course materials, we're going to chuck up on the website. So they're going to shortly be going up on the website in the Learning Center. So that's where all of the current course material is. Be going up for that. And we're also planning on running the course as a half-day course, either virtually or COVID permitting in person. Now we've got a little bit of time for questions. If you want to flick them in the chat, or William, do we have any questions that have come through already?
We don't at the moment, but we'll be able to answer them as time goes on.
Wonderful. So if we've got no questions, we can probably move back to John, I think, but please do feel free to chuck in any questions to the chat. You can chuck them at Will in the Q&A or directly to me. Happy to answer anything. If anyone asks me what the meaning of life, university, and everything is, I think it's 42. Cheers, off to John.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I'm starting to be a little bit worried that the cartoon industry might poach you sometime soon. Tim's a great presenter. Before Tim came on board, I had to run the Jade courses, and I was very, very pleased when Tim came online and took that off me. It was really good. So what we're going to do now is talk about the Jade Road Map. Now, this is a much more generic view of Jade than the than the service pack, which is actually, much more full of details. So now we're going to go back to the basics here and ask the question, why Jade, and build from that as we go along. Don't worry about the title. I'm not going to do this in French. I just thought I'd spice things up a little bit there. Anyway, so let's look at our broader strategies, and then we're going to, from which we're going to build on our strengths with an eye to what's happening in the industry as well. Okay, so if we look at why people chose Jade in the first place, of course, for many people, the cost of entry was quite appealing because it was zero. I mean, nobody, it didn't cost anything, and it still doesn't. For people who want to get involved with Jade, you can still download the latest version and get a free license. The free license is, of course, a little bit limited, but it does enable you to build substantial prototypes that you could certainly show someone enough to warrant some investment. Anyway, but once people have got on board with Jade, the main benefits have always been around productivity and integration. The speed of building structures and code as part of the same process, and that they're always in sync, is a great benefit to the developers. So the initial benefit, and those initial benefits enable us to build prototypes and add weight to proposal very, very quickly, and that's a really big plus for the product. And of course, the variety of data structures enables you to build some quite complex systems. And indeed, certainly from my own position, when I very first became involved with Jade, Jade was its infancy at the time, but the thing that impressed me most about it was the variety of structures you could build with a Jade database, and that continues to be a major benefit of the product. So if we look, before we go into the roadmap in more detail, if we look at where our main areas of investment are, these are the areas that we've invested over the last few years. So what are they? Openness, of course, is an area where interoperability, for example, making it easier to integrate with the entire technology stack. So in recent time, we've been centered around REST, but we're investigating a number of areas. And Stephen's highlighted one today in the presentation that he gave, is how people can build web apps into their Jade system, or build complete new systems, as Stephen has done. And we've been very interested, obviously, in what Stephen's been doing, and we're looking at ways that we can help make that an easier process and look at those sorts of areas. So we're not going to do anything. We're not going to radically take over this process and provide lots of tools in this area. What we want to do is make changes which enable people like Stephen to get to their end result faster. In terms of deployment and operation, we've been focusing on the cloud in recent times, and mainly Jade in containers. And you've seen the work that Hugh's done, that he demonstrated at TOI. And if you come to the second part of the JUG, you'll see one of our customers demonstrating what they've been doing with Jade in containers. Also, there's been a lot of refactoring work going on behind the scenes to enable better source management. You haven't seen, as end users of Jade, a lot of new features coming out of this, but there has been in the back end for us a lot of refactoring going on, because what we have to do is rebuild how we construct and present our source. So the original SCM DDB files were fine if you were going from one integrated Jade environment to another, but to break this down in a way that we can now integrate our sourcing with other tools is quite a task, and we're doing a lot of refactoring that enable those features to become available later on. In terms of user experience, we have been focusing for a long time on making the look of the Jade Thin client better, mainly with the use of skins. But I think we're probably now going forward focusing more on better integration as a path to improving the end user experience. Performance obviously is a constant thing for us. We're always benchmarking. So even for a service pack like the one we're producing at the moment, that will go through a large number of benchmarks to check that no new feature, no bug fix has in any way worsened the performance of any area whatsoever. We don't have any performance enhancements in this service pack. But so, for example, in 2020 itself, we had a feature called collection concurrency, which Hugh McColl talked about at the TOI. And we built a number of benchmarks targeted to look at that feature and ensure that we could validate and quantify the improvements that gave us. It's fair to say, though, that not all the performance improvements that we work on are targeted. So, for example, people will mention that a particular area of the product doesn't work as fast as they'd expect it to under certain circumstances. Then we do a targeted investigation and improve that area. But sometimes they come out of other activities. So we're fixing a bug, or we're doing a non-performance related feature, and we've discovered a possible source of performance improvement. And this often results at least in a piece of work to investigate the viability of a change in that area. And then if we think that it's worthwhile, then we often go on and make those performance changes as part of the next product. So for developer productivity, our focus continues to be invested into the IDE, the debugger, the monitor, the inspector, language, and the root schema. All of these things can affect productivity. So there's a lot of small features that we're constantly looking in those areas, but also we look at the larger picture for some of those once we get to a major release. Now, security, we've covered quite a bit about that tonight. Obviously, we did that review post 2018. And what that did, apart from identify some weaknesses, which we've been correcting as we've been going along, it also gave us a framework, a set of standards, if you like, which we can apply to all new work as we're going forward. And we will continue to review that, both in terms of things that come out of the industry, with new threats that we have to evaluate against the Jade framework to see if we're vulnerable in that way. Indeed, we can get different sources. So, for example, recently we've had a customer who's had a security review of their system, and they would give us some feedback on that. All these things are, if you like, grist to the mill to the security approach. And lastly, although we direct this investment, if you like, in the product, the creation of Jedis and the discussion around them feeds into the backlog. And this is really, really important for us. So your feature requests are a major source of focus for our investment. So if we look at the roadmap, taking a top-down view, we need to pick areas and features that add real benefit to our customers and their customers. So what are the benefits we're after? And when we looked at this, we really, all of the things that we were looking at came really under three headings: confidence, costs, and options. So we really feel that there's already a high level of confidence around the integrity of the Jade database. You heard earlier Henry Varney talking about the reliance that the organisation that Skipton Building Society is, that they place upon the Jade database. So we have confidence in that. We've got to constantly be vigilant around security, accuracy, and the current status of all parts of the Jade system. So in terms of costs, we intend to focus on all the aspects, not only the cost of development, but also the cost of runtime, maintenance, hardware consumption. All of these things can improve the cost, lower the costs of running Jade. And lastly, options. We are very well aware that Jade started out as a self-contained tool, but to retain our loyal customer base, we have to strive to give them options to get the maximum advantage from the investment they've made in the Jade system. So those options could be in terms of interoperability, but they could be in terms of the DevOps approach. So I think so where have we got to? Yeah, right. Okay. So if we just if I can go back a slide, Eve, that's lovely. Thank you very much. So in terms of options, we want to improve interoperability. Obviously, we've talked about that as we've gone along. Testing in the cloud is a very important area here. We want to make it very easy for people to bring up a container for testing, bring up a Jade system in a container so that they can test it and tear it down quickly, those sorts of things. We also want to provide a situation where within that environment, we can make use of other utilities, so we don't have to always rely on all Jade aspects. So as you can see here, we want to make use of things like open source monitoring tools. So organizations, require the ability to analyze all of their data all across the whole organization. And often they're maintained in a variety of places and in a variety of formats. So this part of our industry is growing and maturing fast. So we want to make sure that the data held in a Jade database can participate, and you can get a glimpse of this in the second part of the JUG. Hugh McCall and Tom Hanlon will be showing some elements of that. I think that will be a really interesting presentation in the second part of the JUG. Okay, well, obviously, one of the areas that we are very much concerned around is high availability, and we have to look at, we're looking rather at a number of options around shortening the time that people have their systems unavailable. So that's a major area of focus for us. And lastly, the language. We are continuing to add new elements to the language. And motivation is to improve the developer's experience and productivity, of course, but also to make the transition from non-Jade for non-Jade developers to become Jade developers. So that's a fairly brief overview of where we are with the Jade roadmap. So lastly, let's just focus on the input that we get from you, and that comes in by Jedi's. So we've implemented this using the AHA tool, and this is your opportunity to tell us what you'd like changed, to encourage other people's suggestions, or even to suggest enhancements to other people's suggestions, and all those things, if you like, are grist to the mill to the process that we go through. Recently, we have made some changes here. And one of these things is to give you feedback on what is in our official backlog. So what happens, we use Jira as our workflow tool behind the scenes. So we use AHA to manage the ideas, but once it becomes a piece of work, we manage that inside Jira. So once we have if you like, migrated the idea down to JIRA, it comes an actual piece of work that's in our actual backlog. We then change the status of the idea in JEDI, the status of the JEDI in to backlog, and that gives you the information that we're actually it's part of our work stream. So the IDE, of course, continues to be a separate stream because the IDE, to some extent, is an application, whereas the rest of it is the platform. So we tend to keep that as a separate stream of ideas, and that's still the case. So that to cope with the increasing number of JEDIs, we've introduced an early triage of these JEDIs that come in on a single level, a single developer level, because prior to that, every JEDI would go through a wider review of the complete development team, which is time consuming and slows the process down. So now the early triage will be a single developer. Okay, William, do we have any questions?
We do. Is there any chance that the inability to access system-only methods will be relaxed, such as Jade method compile?
The ability for developers of Jade to access system methods won't be relaxed, no. But if there is a particular method that is a system method and you need that functionality, then we'd happily consider building a public method that did the same thing. The thing about system methods, or indeed any unpublished method, is that we because they're unpublished, if we make any changes, there's no way of notifying you. So the best thing, if you want to use the functionality in a system method, please let us know via JEDI, and we can look at creating a safe and public method that does the functionality that you need.
That's all of them.
That's all of them. Oh, okay, William. Well, I think we head back to John Ashcroft at this stage.
Oh wait, no, sorry. No, it's okay. There aren't any. Sorry, there's just a lot of you in the chat, so I'm getting confused.
Okay, all right. Thank you, William. Over to you, John.
And thanks, John, and thanks for that run through. Really good to get the future being laid out there. And we do encourage questions. So anyone that wants to pop a question in chat, we will get to it. And I see, oh, actually, there's another one.
Yes, we've got one more.
Yes, off you go then, William.
Oh, I thought you were going to. Okay, this one just came in. Will the IDE be released separately to the platform?
We haven't made a decision on that. There has been a request for us to do that. At this moment in time, they are linked and we can't, but we are reviewing those links and to see if there is a way for us to decouple. So all I can say at this moment in stage is it's under review.
Thanks, John. And if any more come in, I'm quite happy to stop for a moment and deal with them. We're just about getting towards the end of this first part of the JUG, part one. Just like to remind you about the poll. So that, I believe, has been running throughout the webinar, and we really are keen to have you answer this. I can't tell how many people have already answered it. So it may well be that everybody already has. In fact, that we've got 68 responses in already. But if not, if you haven't had a chance to do it, we'd really appreciate your clicking one of those options and just giving us your vote. Thank you. The other thing, of course, just a reminder again about doing a wee video. We'd love to see a video of something exciting that you've done with Jade, something exciting or interesting. It doesn't have to be, like you don't have to fill staff sync and demonstrate that. It could just be one little fragment. that somebody else might find interesting or that you're particularly proud of. And I think that'd be great to see that. We're very excited that the JUG this year we're running effectively as 2 parts. In the past, when we were able to physically get together, we settled into a routine where we were running a JUG in New Zealand in the sort of March timeframe, and typically a JUG in the UK about this time of year, actually. This year we've decided to run both JUGs as remote and to run them in a time zone that works for the whole world. So unlike in previous years where the 2 JUGs were actually quite similar, this year they're completely different. And so just because you've been to this one doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the next one, because the next one has got some exciting things in it, mostly building on some sort of future looking stuff that is now possible with Jade 2020. And so we've talked a little bit about some of the things that will be in that part 2, but John mentioned the data fabric stuff, so showing some demonstration of how we can use some quite interesting building blocks out of 2020 to build a data engine. And there's also some demonstrations of some customer work with containers. As you'll be aware, in Jade 2020, we provided some support for containerization of Jade systems. And we're also hoping to be able to show you some geospatial stuff again in the Jade 2020. So we really look forward to seeing you on the 19th of October. And in fact, if you've registered for this session, then you've already registered for the second one, and you'll get an invite in due course for the actual Zoom call. Don't forget to do the survey. So I believe when you leave the session, a survey will pop up, and we'd just be so grateful if you would fill it in for us. It makes a big difference to us. We review them all assiduously and try to incorporate that feedback into the next JUG. So by contributing to the survey, you're genuinely helping us to improve JUG. It's better for us, it's better for you. Next thing is that the developer course, we mentioned we're currently running an internal course to try and ramp up our Jade development capability. But we're also running another public developer course 11 to 15 October, and you can register for that online on the website. So if any of you are looking at bringing on new staff or want to train up staff, then that'll be an opportunity for that. So the developer course 11 to 15, register online. If you've got any questions, just drop them through. And finally, the service pack that John talked about right after the break will be available for download on 30th September from the website in the normal manner. And that, I think, is it. So just remember, we really want to see you at the next one, 19th of October. We really want you to fill in the poll. All this work we're asking you to do, but we really want you to fill in the survey as well. And if it's not too much trouble, you could do a video and send that in as well. And we'll be very grateful, we promise. But it's been wonderful. We've had a record number of attendees. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't, or if you have, let us know on the survey, and we'll keep doing it. We'll try and do better next time. Thank you so much for attending. It's wonderful to have you all as part of the Jade family. I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but at least we're joining hands across the globe to look at Jade tonight. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the 19th of October online, same time, same place. Thank you.